After 7 years of being forgotten at Christmas, I wanted to see if my children would finally show they cared about me, or just my money. So I bought the mountain house as a test. 10 minutes after I posted the photo, I had my answer, and it was worse than I ever imagined. I'm grateful you're here to listen. Before I tell you this heartbreaking story, drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and whether you've experienced family betrayal too. Let me back up a week. December 18th, Tuesday evening. I was in my Charlotte apartment when the family group chat suddenly came alive. Dead silence for months, then everyone's a social butterfly when holidays roll around. The messages started innocent. Zara posting Christmas tree photos, Austin sharing holiday memes, even my ex-wife Sloane showing off her dining room decorations. For a moment I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope? So I typed what felt natural. Hey everyone, what time should I come over Christmas Day? Should I bring anything special? The silence was deafening. Then Austin responded, "Oh, Dad. Actually, we decided to keep it really intimate this year. Just the core family, you know." Core family. 34 years of marriage and raising 2 kids wasn't core enough. Zara piled on. "We thought you'd honestly prefer a quiet day at home anyway. You always seem so out of place at our gatherings." Out of place. At gatherings with my own children. Sloane delivered the killing blow. "It's really for the best, Vaughn. Less overwhelming for everyone. You understand, right? Less overwhelming. My presence was a burden." The final twist came from Zara, wrapped in fake sweetness. "Besides, we know you're not into all the chaos and kids running around. This way you can have your peace and quiet. We'll send lots of photos. Have a lovely quiet Christmas, Dad." I stared at that message for a long time. 7 years, 7 Christmases of maybe next time and we'll call you. 7 years of being the afterthought. But here's the thing about 30 years in corporate strategy. You learn to recognize patterns. You learn that sometimes the best way to get honest information is to create the right conditions for people to reveal themselves. That night I made a strategic decision. I was going to run a test. The next morning I called my financial advisor. "Fletcher, I need to liquidate some investments. About 300,000. I spent 6 days house hunting online. Not condos in Charlotte or retirement communities. Something specific. Something that would serve as the perfect laboratory. I found it at 2 a.m. on December 23rd. An A-frame cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains outside Asheville. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a deck overlooking a valley that stretched to infinity. Morning fog rolling through mountains like smoke. I called the realtor at 8 sharp. "I want to make a cash offer. Don't you want to see it first?" "I've seen everything I need to see." By Christmas Eve, papers were signed. I'd purchased it through an LLC called Mountain Sanctuary Holdings. Clean, untraceable, bulletproof. Old corporate habits. Christmas morning arrived gray and cold. I sat in my empty apartment, coffee growing cold, watching winter sun struggle through clouds. My phone sat silent. No Merry Christmas Dad texts. No calls. Nothing. At exactly 10 a.m. I opened Instagram and uploaded the photo. The deck shot with that impossible mountain view. I'd thought hard about the caption. It needed to be perfect. Finally found my quiet place to enjoy retirement. I hit post and waited. In 30 years of business, I'd run countless tests. Market research focus groups, competitive analysis. But I'd never used my own heart as the laboratory. The phone buzzed at exactly 10:10 a.m. 10 minutes. That's how long it took them to go from, "You're not family enough for Christmas," to "Congratulations on our new house." My screen lit up like a slot machine hitting jackpot. Message after message cascaded down in a digital avalanche of sudden, suffocating enthusiasm. I watched in real time as my family transformed from indifferent strangers into my biggest cheerleaders. The first notification made my stomach drop. Sloane, my ex-wife, who dismissed me just a week ago, was suddenly gushing like a proud mother. "Vaughn, what a beautiful surprise. Why didn't you tell us you were house hunting? We're so proud of you." Proud. The woman who'd told me I was overwhelming was now proud of me. I could practically hear the exclamation points dripping with synthetic sweetness. Within 2 minutes, Austin jumped in like a vulture circling fresh roadkill. "Dad, this is perfect timing. Our lease expires next month, and Kendall needs space for the baby." Perfect timing, not congratulations or what a beautiful place, just perfect timing for his convenience. Then Zara, my daughter, who'd called me out of place just days ago, started orchestrating like a general, planning an invasion. "OMG. Yes, Austin, you and Kendall can take the master bedroom. I'll help you move this weekend." The master bedroom? My master bedroom? In the house I'd bought with my money that they'd just learned about 60 seconds ago. But Sloane wasn't finished. This is such a blessing. Finally, our family has a proper gathering place. I can already picture Christmas morning there. Christmas morning there. The Christmas morning I'd just spent alone in my apartment because I wasn't family enough to join them. The messages kept coming, each one more presumptuous than the last. Zara delivered what might have been the cruelest irony I've ever experienced. Dad, you're such a genius. Now we can have those big family Christmases you always wanted. Those big family Christmases I always wanted. The ones they'd excluded me from for 7 straight years. I sat there watching my phone screen, feeling like I was witnessing a car crash in slow motion. These people who'd systematically erased me from their holiday traditions were now planning to move into my sanctuary. The house I'd bought to escape them was being claimed as their inheritance while I was still breathing. Austin wasn't done. Should we rent a U-Haul or just make multiple trips? The baby furniture is going to need careful handling. Baby furniture. He was already planning the logistics of moving into my house, not asking. Planning. Then came Sloane's masterpiece, the final insult wrapped in fake gratitude. Vaughn, honey, you don't know how much this means to us. You're finally putting family first. We always knew you had it in you. Family first. I stared at those words until they blurred. The same people who'd told me I was too overwhelming for their intimate family gathering were now lecturing me about putting family first. I scrolled back through the messages, watching the timestamp progression. 10:10 a.m., 10:12, 10:15, 10:25. In 15 minutes, they'd gone from congratulating me to planning their move-in date. From surprise to complete ownership of my life decision. Austin's final message landed like a sledgehammer. Thanks, Dad. We'll be there Friday with the moving truck. Don't worry about cleaning. We'll make it feel like home. They'll make it feel like home. My home. The home I'd bought to get away from exactly this kind of presumption. I set the phone down with shaking hands, then picked it up again. The test was over. The results were in, and now it was time to deliver them. I picked up my phone and typed 3 words, no, not happening. The group chat went dead silent. The silence after my rejection wasn't indifference. This was the calm before a hurricane, and every corporate instinct I'd developed over 30 years was screaming the same message, prepare for war. I walked to my kitchen window, looking out at Charlotte's gray skyline. Somewhere out there, my children were plotting their next move. The difference was I'd been planning mine since I decided to run this test. My phone rang at 4:30. Walter Coleman's gravelly voice came through the speaker. Saw your post this morning. Hell of a view. How'd the family react? Walter had been my Army Reserve sergeant 20 years ago, then transitioned to law enforcement and private security consulting. More importantly, he was the only person I knew who'd never asked me for money. About like you'd expect, I said. That bad, huh? What did they want? To move in, immediately, without asking. Walter whistled low. Jesus, Vaughn, I'm sorry, but I can't say I'm surprised. You've been talking about this pattern for years. No bullshit, no false comfort, just honest assessment. I told them no. Good. What's your next move? That's what I'm figuring out. We'll figure it out fast. People like that don't take no for an answer. They escalate. After we hung up, I sat in my home office and analyzed the situation like any business problem. Assets house owned outright through LLC. Clean title, bulletproof legal structure. Liabilities. Family members who felt entitled to my property and had just been publicly rejected. Strategic advantages. 30 years of corporate experience, financial resources, and documentation of everything. I opened my laptop and started building my case. Screenshots of every group chat message. Timestamps showing the progression from exclusion to exploitation. A detailed timeline of the week's events. Then I called Elwyn Mills, the attorney who'd handled my LLC formation. Elwyn, it's Vaughn Parker. I need to discuss potential property issues. What kind of issues? The kind where family members think they have rights to property they don't own. Her voice sharpened with professional interest. How soon can you be here? An hour later, I was in her downtown office, watching her review the message screenshots with surgical precision. This is textbook entitlement behavior, she said. The good news is your LLC structure gives you significant protection. Mountain Sanctuary. Holdings owns the property, not Vaughn Parker, personally. That creates legal distance. What about the emotional manipulation? Irrelevant from a legal standpoint. Property law doesn't recognize feelings. Either they have legal rights or they don't, and they don't. She pulled out a legal pad. I'm preparing a formal cease and desist letter. We'll also file a preemptive no trespass order with the county sheriff. If they show up uninvited, you'll have legal standing to remove them. How long will that take? Paperwork ready by tomorrow morning. That evening, I drove up to the mountain house for the first time since buying it. The 3-hour drive crystallized my strategy. I walked through my new home, checking the security system installed during closing. Motion-activated cameras, smart locks, full perimeter coverage. The realtor had thought I was paranoid. Turns out I was just prepared. Standing on the deck as sunset painted the mountains, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not hope exactly, but confidence. The kind that comes from being thoroughly prepared. My phone buzzed with Walter's text. How'd the lawyer meeting go? Better than expected. Turns out an LLC is like body armor. Good. Timeline. Papers filed tomorrow. Security active. Evidence documented. And if they show up anyway, I looked out at the valley, feeling the mountain silence wrap around me like armor. Then they'll learn the difference between wanting something and being entitled to it. Friday morning, 8 a.m. 3 vehicles grinding up my mountain road like an occupying army. I watched through security cameras from my kitchen coffee steady in my hands. The U-Haul truck led the procession, followed by 2 SUVs. A white van marked Mountain Lock and Key brought up the rear. They'd brought a locksmith to break into my house while I was inside. Austin climbed out and started directing traffic like a general. Zara emerged, phone pressed to her ear, coordinating with sharp gestures. Sloane surveyed my property with the satisfied air of someone inspecting her new summer home. Kendall moved carefully with her pregnant belly, looking uncomfortable. She was the only one who seemed to register this was someone else's property. The locksmith stood by his van, increasingly uncomfortable, as Austin unloaded boxes marked nursery. Maybe we should call him first, Kendall said through the audio feed. Austin barely glanced her way. It's handled. Dad's just being dramatic. Dramatic. That's what they called property rights. Zara marched to my front door and pressed the doorbell with complete confidence. When I didn't answer, she pressed again. Then again. Dad, Austin boomed. Stop being ridiculous. We drove 3 hours. 3 hours with a moving truck and locksmith planning to break into my home, and I was ridiculous. The locksmith approached Austin reluctantly. Sir, are you sure you have authority? The house appears occupied. It's our family property. Austin lied smoothly. My father's having some issues. We're here to help. Issues. I had issues because I wouldn't let them steal my house? Zara pounded on the door. Dad, we know you're in there. Time to make my presence known. I walked to the intercom panel and pressed talk. My amplified voice cut through the mountain air. You are trespassing on private property owned by Mountain Sanctuary Holdings, LLC. You have no legal right to be here. Leave immediately. Sudden silence. They'd expected hurt feelings, emotional manipulation, not corporate precision through a professional security system. Austin's face flushed red. Dad opened this door. You can't lock out your own family. I'm not locking out family. I'm protecting private property from trespassers. Sloane stepped forward, switching to manipulation mode. Vaughn, honey, we're not trespassers. We're your children. We love you. Love. They loved me so much they'd excluded me from Christmas, then tried to steal my house. The locksmith backed toward his van. Look, folks, I think there's been a misunderstanding. If the property owner doesn't consent, he consents, Zara snapped. He's just confused. Confused? Now I was confused for not letting them move in without permission. Austin stormed to the locksmith, probably offering more money. Kendall stood by the U-Haul, hand on her belly, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. The locksmith pulled out his drill. That's when I activated Phase 2 of my security protocol. Not just cameras and intercom, but the system Elowen had helped implement yesterday. Electronic paper trail of everything happening on my property. I picked up my phone and pressed speed dial. Sheriff's office. This is Vaughn Parker at 2847 Mountain View Road. I have trespassers attempting unauthorized entry with power tools. Yes, I have a filed no trespass order. Case number 2023-12-7. Through the cameras, I watched the locksmith's drill bite into my reinforced door frame. Austin stood behind him, arms crossed, looking like a man who'd never been told no in his life. Kendall caught my eye through the camera, her expression troubled. For a moment, she looked directly at the lens, and I saw something that gave me hope. Shame. Phase 1 complete. Time for Phase 2. Blue and red lights cutting through the mountain morning like justice itself. Sheriff Martinez's patrol car crunched up the gravel with unhurried confidence. I watched through cameras as my family's expressions shifted from defiant entitlement to panic. The locksmith dropped his drill like it had caught fire. Martinez stepped out, a weathered man in his 50s, who'd clearly seen this scenario before. He surveyed the U-Haul scattered boxes, and my family clustered like defendants at trial. "Morning, folks. Seems we have a situation." Sloan immediately switched to victim mode. "Officer, thank goodness. This is all a misunderstanding. This is our family's house, and Vaughn's having some kind of episode. We're just trying to help him. Our family's house." My property had somehow become communal in her twisted logic. Martinez pulled out his notebook. "I need identification from all of you." Austin stepped forward with familiar bluster. "This is a family matter. Sir, I have a report of trespassing and attempted breaking and entering. That makes it legal. Identification. Now." They handed over licenses reluctantly. Martinez examined each one, then consulted his clipboard. "Good news and bad news. Good news, I know exactly what's happening. Bad news, you're violating a legally filed no trespass order." He held up a document. "This property is owned by Mountain Sanctuary Holdings, LLC. I have a recorded notice specifically prohibiting Austin Parker, Zara Parker, and Sloan Parker from these premises." Stunned silence. Austin's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. "An LLC," Sloan's voice cracked. "That's just paperwork. He's my ex-husband. Those are my children. Ma'am, there's no such thing as family rights in criminal trespass. This is private property. You were formally warned." He turned to the locksmith, frantically packing tools. "Were you aware these individuals had no legal right to access this property?" The locksmith didn't look up. "No, sir. They said family emergency owner was incapacitated. I'm done. I'm leaving." He practically ran to his van. Martinez turned back with kindergarten teacher patience. "Property law doesn't care about family relationships. Either you have legal rights or you don't. And you don't." Austin's face went purple. "This is outrageous. You'll hear from our lawyers. Call them from somewhere else. Right now you're leaving." Martinez retrieved a manila envelope from his car. "Your copy of the recorded notice. Return here, you'll be arrested. Contact the owner. It's harassment." He gestured toward their vehicles. "Load your belongings and drive away. You're not coming back." Checkmate delivered with bureaucratic precision. Austin looked ready to argue, but Martinez's stance suggested that would be unwise. Zara stood calculating angles. Kendall moved first, walking slowly to the U-Haul, hand on her belly, looking exhausted. They loaded boxes in tense silence, cardboard scraping metal. Austin slammed the rear door hard enough to shake the truck. Martinez stood arms crossed, watching every movement. "Next time you set foot here, you'll be arrested." Zara paused at her car door, looking back with calculation or rage. "Dad made his choice," she said loud enough for cameras. "Now we make ours." The convoy pulled away, taillights disappearing down the mountain road. Martinez followed at a distance, ensuring they left the area completely. I stood in my kitchen watching the empty driveway through the monitors. The silence that rushed back felt profound after the chaos. My coffee had gone cold, but my hands were steady. The first battle was over, but Zara's parting words echoed in the mountain air, and I knew this was just the beginning. They retreated from the mountain, but the war moved online. The first alert came at 6 a.m. on December 30th. My phone buzzed with a credit monitoring notification. "New account application detected using your social security number." This wasn't random identity theft. This was surgical and personal. Over 2 hours, alerts kept coming. Mail forwarding request. Lease agreement filed with county clerk, utility connections. Each bearing my forged signature, each strategically dated to build Austin's supposed tenancy paper trail. Zara wasn't just angry. She was orchestrating sophisticated fraud to establish legal residency through fabricated documents. I called the Lowen Mills at 7:30. "They've moved to document fraud," I said without preamble. "What kind?" "Fake lease agreements, mail forwarding, credit applications, all using my information to make Austin look like a legal tenant." Elowen's voice sharpened. "Forward me everything. Don't respond directly. We're building a federal case now." Federal. The word hung like a thunderclap. I spent the morning documenting everything. Credit alert screenshots, forged signatures bearing no resemblance to my handwriting, timestamps showing applications filed while I was elsewhere. The most damning piece came at noon, a lease agreement supposedly signed December 20th, 4 days before I'd closed on the house. Zara had forgotten basic chronology in her rush to create evidence. But the sophistication disturbed me most. This wasn't desperate emotion. This was calculated criminal behavior, orchestrated by my daughter with corporate precision. Walter called at 2 p.m. Your family's been asking around about property management companies, specifically ones handling difficult tenant situations. They're legitimizing their claim through third parties. Exactly. Show fake lease claim you're unstable, need professional help managing your assets. The audacity was breathtaking. They were trying to have me declared incompetent so a management company would give them access. Something else, Walter continued. Kendall Parker visited the sheriff yesterday asking about domestic violence resources. Didn't file a report, but asked lots of questions about protecting herself and her unborn child from family pressure. Kendall, the one showing conscience, was cracking under her husband's criminal behavior. That evening I sat surrounded by printed evidence. Forged documents, fraudulent applications, identity theft attempts. The paper trail painted clear, escalating desperation. Alawan emailed, reviewed materials. This crossed from civil to criminal. Prepare an emergency federal motion. Document everything, touch nothing, respond to no communications. I looked out at the dark valley. Somewhere down there my children planned their next move, but they'd made a critical error. They'd assumed I was just a hurt father who could be overwhelmed with paperwork. They'd forgotten I was a businessman who understood that fraud's best defense was meticulous documentation and professional legal response. My phone buzzed with final alert. Suspicious activity detected on Mountain Sanctuary Holdings LLC account. They were accessing the corporate account now, the one controlling property, deed utilities, everything. I forwarded it to Elowen 3rd Federal Crime today. Her response came within minutes. This crossed from family drama into federal crimes. Emergency hearings scheduled. January 2nd. I set my phone down and looked out at the mountain darkness. The silence felt different now, not peaceful but expectant, like the moment before a storm breaks. They'd wanted to play hardball. Now they'd discover what that actually meant. New Year's Eve. Time to close the books on the worst family relationship of my life. I woke to absolute mountain silence. No traffic, no drama. Just wind through pines and a hawk circling the valley. For the first time in weeks, I felt approaching peace. That lasted until my phone rang at 8 a.m. Emergency motion granted. Alawan's voice was crisp with satisfaction. Federal judge signed restraining orders this morning. Criminal charges filed. FBI Financial Crimes Unit opened a case. FBI. My children had graduated from disappointments to federal suspects. Timeline. Warrants executable after January 1st. Restraining orders effective immediately. They drive past your property. They're in federal custody. I walked onto the deck, coffee in hand. Somewhere in that valley, my family was planning their next desperate move. Walter called an hour later with confirming intelligence. Someone claiming to be your power of attorney tried hiring a mediation service. Wanted them at your property today for an emergency family intervention about a competency dispute. Cash payment. Double rate. When they asked for power of attorney documentation, they hung up. Fake mediator. Show up with someone in a suit, hoping I'd be intimidated into letting them inside for professional consultation. More news. Kendall Parker checked into hospital yesterday. Pregnancy complications from stress. She's asking about witness protection. Witness protection. The pregnant woman was ready to testify against her husband's criminal conspiracy. Is she safe? Hospital security notified. Listed under assumed name. But Vaughn, she's scared. Says Austin's talking about permanent solutions to the family problem. Permanent solutions. I didn't want to think what that meant. I spent the afternoon on final preparations. Evidence packages organized. Digital files backed up. Security system tested. The mountain house had become a fortress of documentation. Every surface held printed emails, legal filings, forged signature photographs. A war room for someone fighting for their life. At sunset, I stood on the deck, watching light fade behind mountains. The silence felt expectant now, like a storm building for days finally ready to break. Walter texted, Intel confirms they're coming tomorrow. Fake mediator, moving truck, the whole show. One last desperate play. I replied, let them come. The trap is set. You sure you're ready? I looked at the valley lights twinkling like fallen stars. This place had been a test to see if my children cared about me or just my money. The test was over. Results were in. Now came consequences. I've been ready my whole life. I just didn't know it. As midnight approached, I raised bourbon to the mountain darkness. Not celebrating the new year, but toasting the end of an old life. The life where I'd been someone's ATM backup plan disappointment. Tomorrow that version of Vaughn Parker would die. Something stronger would take his place. The mountain silence wrapped around me like armor. Let them come with their fake mediator and their moving truck and their desperate schemes. I had federal law, documented evidence, and 30 years of business experience on my side. Most importantly, I had something they'd never understand, the peace that comes from finally knowing exactly who you're dealing with. Tomorrow we finish this. New Year's Day. 3 cars climbing my mountain road for the last time. I watched them through the security cameras, coffee steady in my hands, despite everything. The same U-Haul from before, flanked by the family SUVs. But this time there was a 4th vehicle, a silver sedan with professional plates that screamed legitimate business. The fake mediator had arrived. They parked in formation like a military operation. Austin emerged first, followed by Zara, then Sloane, looking haggard and desperate. The man in the expensive suit stepped out of the sedan, briefcase in hand, playing his role to perfection. Notably absent was Kendall. Smart woman. I pressed the intercom button before they could reach the door. You are in violation of federal restraining orders. Leave immediately or face arrest. The fake mediator stepped forward, all professional confidence and practiced authority. Mr. Parker, my name is David Hutchinson, certified family mediator. I'm here to resolve this unfortunate misunderstanding in a civilized manner. Civilized. That's what they called breaking into someone's home now. I have documentation showing your family's legitimate concerns about your mental state and property management capabilities. He continued pulling papers from his briefcase. We can resolve this amicably. I almost laughed. They'd hired an actor good enough to believe his own performance. Mr. Hutchinson, I said through the intercom, I have documentation too. Federal criminal charges for mail fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. Filed yesterday. Active warrants. The mediator's confident smile flickered. This wasn't in his script. Austin pushed past him. Dad, enough games. We're coming in whether you like it or not. Actually, you're not. Sheriff Martinez's patrol car rounded the bend, followed by 2 federal vehicles with FBI markings. The cavalry had arrived right on schedule. The fake mediator took one look at the federal agents and started backing toward his car. There seems to be some confusion here. I was told this was a civil matter. It was Agent Blake Harrison said, stepping out of the lead FBI vehicle. Until your clients committed federal crimes. He held up a folder thick with documentation. Austin Parker. Zara. Parker, you're under arrest for mail fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The world stopped. Sloane's face went white. Arrested! This is insane. Where is family? Ma'am, family members can commit federal crimes just like anyone else. Austin's face went from shock to rage in seconds. You did this, he screamed at me. You destroyed your own family? No, I said through the intercom, my voice steady. I protected myself from criminals who happened to be related to me. That's when Kendall appeared. She walked up the driveway slowly, deliberately, her pregnant belly prominent under her coat. She looked exhausted but determined. I won't be part of this, she said, her voice carrying clearly in the mountain air. I won't steal from you, Vaughn. I won't raise my child to think this is acceptable. Austin stared at his wife in disbelief. Kendall, what are you doing? What I should have done weeks ago. She turned to Agent Harrison. I have information about the document forgery. I have recordings of them planning the fraud. I want to cooperate. The betrayal hit Austin like a physical blow, his own wife choosing conscience over conspiracy. You're all insane, he shouted. This is our family. Families stick together. No, Kendall said quietly. Families love each other. They don't steal from each other. Agent Harrison moved with professional efficiency. Austin Parker, you have the right to remain silent. As they read him his rights, Austin kept screaming. At me at Kendall, at the agents, at the mountain itself. You destroyed everything. Everything. Zara went quietly, already calculating her legal options. Sloane collapsed into tears, the manipulative performance finally cracking under federal pressure. The fake mediator had disappeared entirely, probably halfway back to Charlotte by now. As the FBI vehicles pulled away with my children in custody, I stood on my deck watching their taillights disappear down the mountain road. The silence that followed was profound. Kendall remained standing by her car, looking up at the house. Thank you, I called down to her. She nodded, one hand on her belly. I'm sorry it took so long. You did the right thing. I know, that's why it was so hard. She got in her car and drove away, leaving me alone with the mountain silence and the wreckage of what had once been called a family. The test was over. The results were final. And for the first time in 7 years, I was truly free. New Year's Day evening. The mountain was quiet again, finally truly quiet. I sat on my deck with bourbon, watching light fade behind the ridgeline. The silence felt different now, not empty but full, charged with possibility instead of dread. Walter arrived at Sunset Pickup Truck, crunching up gravel with beer and barbecue takeout. "Figured you might want company," he said, settling beside me, "and food that isn't frozen dinner." We ate in comfortable silence, watching valley lights twinkle below. Two old soldiers who'd seen enough battles to appreciate peace. "In 30 years of knowing you, I've never seen you this calm," Walter said. He was right. The constant anxiety that had been my companion for 7 years was gone. No more wondering when the next exclusion would come, when I'd be made to feel like a burden for existing. "The test is over," I said. "And they failed, spectacularly." My phone buzzed. For a moment, old anxiety flickered. Then I saw the name Kendall. "Thank you for giving me courage to do the right thing. The baby and I are safe. Starting over, you saved us both." I showed Walter the message. He nodded approvingly. "That girl's got more backbone than the rest combined. Kid's lucky to have her as a mother. She's the only one who chose to be decent when it mattered. That's what real family does. They choose you because they want to, not because they have to. Real family." Walter had driven 3 hours on New Year's Day just so I wouldn't be alone. He'd never asked for money, never made me feel like a burden, never excluded me from anything. "You know what's strangest?" I said. "I spent 7 years hurt because they didn't want me at Christmas dinners, but I never actually wanted to be there. I just wanted to be wanted." Walter raised his beer. "To being wanted by people worth wanting you back." We clinked bottles, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. Contentment. The deep satisfaction of finally knowing exactly where you stand. "So what's next?" Walter asked. I looked at the valley lights scattered like stars across darkness. My valley now, my peace, my choice. I'm going to learn what Christmas feels like when I'm actually wanted. Maybe invite people who choose to be here. Sounds revolutionary. As midnight approached, I walked Walter to his truck. Mountain air was crisp and clean, carrying pine scent and possibility. "You did good, Vaughn." Took guts to stand up to them. Took guts to finally admit what I'd known all along. After he left, I stood alone on my deck. The silence was complete, broken only by wind through trees and a distant owl call. I thought about the boy who'd spent Christmas mornings wondering why he wasn't enough. The young man who'd tried so hard to earn love that couldn't be earned. The father who'd kept hoping maybe this year would be different. All of them were gone, replaced by someone who finally understood that love isn't something you earn or win. It's something freely given by people who choose to see your worth. I raised my glass to the mountain darkness one final time. Some gifts are worth waiting 62 years for. The mountain didn't answer, but it didn't need to. The silence was answer enough. Looking back on this true story, I have to ask myself, why did I wait 62 years to stand up for my own worth? Don't be like me, friends. Don't spend decades hoping people will change when God has already shown you who they really are. The lesson I learned from these grandpa stories isn't just about toxic family members. It's about recognizing that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. God gives us wisdom to see patterns, and I ignored that wisdom for 7 long years. When people show you they don't value, you believe them the first time. This true story taught me that real family isn't about blood relations. It's about people who choose to love and respect you. God places genuine people in our path when we're ready to receive them. Walter became more family to me than my own children ever were. My biggest regret, not setting boundaries sooner. These grandpa stories we tell ourselves about family first can become prisons if we're not careful. God doesn't require us to accept abuse, even from relatives. Sometimes protecting your peace means disappointing people who never truly cared about your happiness anyway. The mountain house became my sanctuary, because I finally learned that being alone with people who love you is better than being surrounded by people who don't. This true story changed everything for me. If my story resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? I'd love to hear your experiences. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video with someone who might need to hear this message today. The day I caught my wife in bed with my lawyer wasn't the worst betrayal that came when my own son looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're pathetic, Dad. She deserves a real man." 3 months later, they'd stripped me of my $2.8 million oil empire, stolen my home, and left me with nothing but shame. They thought they'd destroyed a broken old fool who had nowhere left to turn. They were wrong about what kind of man they were dealing with. Now I'm about to tell you how losing everything led me to discover something that changed my entire life forever. Before I tell you how this all started, drop a comment below what time is it where you're watching this, and tell me, have you ever had someone you trusted completely turn their back on you when you needed them most? I'm Drake Garrett, 55 years old, and for 30 years I built what I thought was an empire. Garrett Oil Services started in a rented warehouse on the outskirts of Houston back in 1994. I had a business degree, $15,000 from my late father, and a pregnant girlfriend named Diana who believed in my dreams. By 2024, we were pulling in $2.8 million annually. 37 employees servicing half the independent oil operations between Houston and Beaumont. The success bought us a 6-bedroom colonial in River Oaks, Diana's Mercedes, and Austin's Rice University education in petroleum engineering. But success demands sacrifice, and I was about to learn the true cost. The photo on my desk showed my grandfather Charles in oil-stained coveralls, grinning beside a derrick in 1969. Charles Garrett, the wildcatter who taught me that Texas oil was liquid gold, and a man's word was his bond. He'd been gone since I was 12, but his weathered face reminded me daily that everything worth having required hard work. Diana had evolved from my high school sweetheart into one of Houston's top real estate agents. Smart, beautiful, ambitious, she networked at country club events and charity galas, building connections that brought us several major contracts. While she was socializing and I was working 16-hour days, our son Austin was growing up without us. Little league games missed for emergency service calls. School plays where my seat stayed empty because rigs went down. His Rice graduation where I arrived late in work boots because a pipeline burst in Katy. Each missed moment built walls between us until Austin looked at me like a stranger. Last Tuesday should have been different. Austin had just made senior engineer at Chevron, youngest in his department. Diana planned a celebration dinner at home. I promised to be there by 7. At 8:15, I walked through the door to find them finishing dessert in silence. "Dad, you missed it again?" Austin said without looking up. His voice carried familiar disappointment. "Son, I'm sorry. The Brennan account had an emergency." "There's always an emergency." Diana's wine glass hit the table hard. 30 years, Drake. 30 years of emergencies that matter more than your family. I tried explaining about contracts' responsibilities, building something lasting. Austin shook his head. "You know what, Dad, I used to make excuses for you. Tell friends you were working hard for us. But Mom's right." He stood up, chair scraping hardwood. "You didn't miss my childhood because you had to. You missed it because you chose to." The words hit like a physical blow. "Austin, that's not fair." "Fair what's not fair is having a father who cares more about oil rigs than his own son." Diana stood too face-flushed with wine and accumulated resentment. "I can't keep pretending this marriage still works, Drake. I won't." She walked out of that dining room, and something in her voice told me this wasn't just about dinner anymore. Diana's words from that dinner kept echoing in my head for days. "I can't keep pretending this marriage still works." There was something final in her voice, something that made me start noticing things I'd been too busy to see. The late-night phone calls she'd take in the other room. The new jewelry I hadn't bought her. The way she'd started dressing up for client meetings that ran well into the evening. Tuesday afternoon, when she said she'd be showing properties in River Oaks, I decided to come home early and surprise her with lunch. The black Mercedes in my driveway told me everything I needed to know. I recognized that car, Theodore Manning, Houston's most ruthless corporate attorney. I'd seen it at country club events, always surrounded by admiring socialites and ambitious wives. My grandfather Charles used to say, "Always watch for the signs, boy. Oil wells give warnings before they blow." I should have been watching the signs in my own home. The house felt different the moment I stepped inside. Too quiet, with an electric tension that made my skin crawl. The bedroom door was closed, something Diana never did during the day. I stood in the hallway listening to sounds that would replay in my nightmares. Not just the obvious sounds, but comfortable laughter between two people who'd clearly been doing this for a long time. I walked back downstairs and sat at my kitchen table staring at Austin's celebration cake, the dinner I'd missed, the moment everything started unraveling. 20 minutes later, Theodore walked down my stairs, adjusting his Italian suit like he owned the place. Tall, silver-haired, the kind of lawyer who charged $1,000 an hour and made judges laugh at his jokes. He stopped when he saw me, but didn't look surprised. Just smiled, that predatory smile lawyers perfect in law school. "Drake, this is awkward." Diana appeared behind him in the silk robe I'd bought her last Christmas. No shame, no guilt, just defiance. "How long?" I asked. Does it matter? She poured herself coffee like this was just another Tuesday. This is what happens when you choose work over family, Drake. Smart women find what they need elsewhere. We can work this out. Counseling therapy. Work it out. Theodore laughed. Drake, you still don't get it. This isn't a rough patch. This is an ending. Austin's truck rumbled into the driveway. My heart lifted, finally someone on my side. My son would see this betrayal for what it was. Austin walked through the door, surveyed the scene with complete indifference, and shrugged. So you know now. The casual tone hit me like ice water. Austin, your mother's cheatin'. Yeah, so. He grabbed a beer from the fridge, popped it open. What did you expect? You've been married to your job for 26 years. Mom deserves someone who actually pays attention to her. This is adultery, son. This is wrong. Austin took a long drink, studying me like I was something pathetic. What's wrong is a husband who misses his own son's promotion dinner. What's wrong is a father who's never been to a single important moment in my life. His voice was flat, emotionless. Theodore's been more present in our lives these past 2 years than you've been in 2 decades. Diana moved to Austin's side, and he put his arm around her shoulders protectively. You knew about this, I whispered. Of course I knew. Mom needed someone to talk to about her dead marriage. Austin's smile was cruel. I encouraged her. Told her she deserved better than a workaholic who treats his family like inconveniences. Theodore checked his Rolex. This has been illuminating, but we have dinner reservations. He looked at me without an ounce of sympathy. Some storms you just can't weather, Drake. Smart men learn when to get out of the rain. They walked out together, my wife, my son's blessing, and the lawyer who just declared war on everything I'd built. Theodore Manning hadn't been bluffing about war. 3 days after walking out with my wife, the first shot was fired at my professional reputation. The divorce papers arrived during our weekly staff meeting, delivered by a process server who walked into our conference room like he owned the place. 25 employees watched as I was handed documents that would destroy everything we'd created together. Drake Garrett. You've been served. The papers weren't just about ending a marriage. They were a blueprint for systematic destruction. Theodore accused me of financial manipulation, hidden assets, emotional abuse, and abandonment. Every claim was a lie, but in family court perception often mattered more than truth. Judge Harrison had a reputation for fairness throughout Harris County. What I didn't know was that Theodore had been contributing to his re-election campaigns for 15 years. Your Honor. Theodore began with practiced authority. My client has suffered 22 years of systematic emotional abuse. Mr. Garrett has prioritized business over family, creating a hostile environment that damaged both my client and their son, Paul Mitchell. My attorney was outgunned from the start. These accusations are baseless, Your Honor. Mr. Garrett built his company to provide for his family. Provide? Theodore's theatrical laugh filled the courtroom. We have testimony proving otherwise. Austin took the stand wearing an expensive suit I'd never seen before. He didn't look at me once. Mr. Foster, can you describe your relationship with your father? Austin's voice was clear, emotionless. My father was never present. He missed every important moment of my childhood school. Plays, baseball games, graduation. Work always came first. He paused for effect. My mother tried to hold our family together while he built his empire. She deserves compensation for 22 years of being married to a ghost. Did you witness emotional abuse? Constant neglect is emotional abuse. Making your wife feel invisible is emotional abuse. Treating your son like an inconvenience is emotional abuse. Paul's cross-examination was useless. Austin answered every question with cold precision, painting me as a monster who destroyed his family through selfishness. The forensic accountant Theodore brought was his cousin discovered too late. He testified I'd been hiding money in offshore accounts that didn't exist, systematically undervaluing company assets. Every denial cost me more in legal fees. Judge Harrison's ruling was swift and brutal. The business had to be sold immediately during an industry downturn valued at only $1.8 million instead of its true worth. Diana received the house worth $800,000, 3 years, alimony, and most liquid assets. When the gavel fell, I'd lost everything. 30 years of work reduced to $300,000 in Theodore Manning's rigged game. Paul caught up with me in the parking lot. Drake, I'm sorry. I've never seen anything like this. Theodore had everything planned from the beginning. I stood beside my pickup truck, the only asset they'd let me keep, watching my former life disappear into legal documents and court orders. The war was over and I'd lost everything that mattered. The war might have been over, but living with the consequences was a daily battle I wasn't winning. 3 months later, I was eating ramen noodles in an $800 apartment, watching strangers run the company I'd built from nothing. The place smelled like mildew and defeat, with paper-thin walls that let me hear every life falling apart around me. My new reality was a studio on Houston's east side, 40 minutes from the life I used to know. The hardest part wasn't the poverty, it was the invisibility. People I'd known for years would cross the street when they saw me coming. Former employees found urgent business elsewhere when I walked into stores. Country club members looked right through me like I was a ghost. Tommy, my own brother, had to keep his distance. Diana had kept him on at the company, and he needed his job. We met once at a highway rest stop like criminals. "I'm sorry, Drake," he whispered, glancing around nervously. "She's got everyone convinced you're planning something. If she finds out I'm talking to you, I'm gone." Even my own blood had to treat me like a pariah. The local business journal twisted the knife deeper. Austin on the cover, wearing a tailored suit, with the headline, "Young Visionary Takes Over Family Empire." The article painted him as a brilliant engineer who'd rescued the company from his father's outdated management style. They'd rebranded it Foster Oil Services. My name erased completely. Diana and Theodore weren't hiding anymore either. Society page photos showed them at charity galas. Diana glowing with happiness I hadn't seen in years, while Theodore worked rooms, like he owned them. My bank account held exactly $437. The court garnished 70% of my part-time warehouse wages for alimony based on my previous income, not current reality. Most days I sat staring at water-stained ceilings, wondering how it had all gone so wrong so fast. The silence was the worst part. No phone calls, no meetings, no decisions. Just endless hours replaying every mistake, every missed dinner, every time I'd chosen work over family. I was sorting through my father's belongings looking for anything valuable to sell when I found Charles's old toolbox buried under winter coats. The metal was rusted but solid, filled with wrenches and gauges from his wildcatting days. At the bottom, wrapped in oilcloth, was a manila envelope marked "Important Papers." Inside were old documents and a yellowed receipt from Houston Self-Storage, dated 1973. Unit 47 paid through 2025. I'd completely forgotten about it. After Charles died, when I was 12, Dad had stored his things away. The monthly payments were automatically deducted from an old account so small we'd never noticed. For the first time in months, I felt something other than despair. Maybe there was something in that storage unit worth selling. Maybe Charles had left behind tools or equipment that could help me get back on my feet. I drove across town in my beat-up pickup to the storage facility, rows of metal units under the Texas sun holding forgotten pieces of people's lives. Unit 47 sat at the end of a long row, secured with a heavy padlock that looked older than my marriage. I stood there holding the rusty key, wondering what my grandfather had thought was important enough to preserve for 50 years. Inside my grandfather's storage unit, beneath decades of accumulated dust, was a shoebox that would change everything. The unit was packed with furniture covered in yellowed sheets, boxes of Christmas decorations, and the memories of a man who'd survived the Great Depression. Charles's voice echoed in my memory. "Always thinking ahead, Drake. That's how a man survives." I started with obvious items, tools that might have value, old furniture to sell. But the personal items stopped me cold. Photo albums from his wildcatting days, letters from my grandmother, a Purple Heart from Korea I'd never known existed. In the back corner, wrapped in an old army blanket, was a metal filing cabinet, organized with military precision. The shoebox sat on top, marked in Charles's careful handwriting, "For Drake's emergency." Inside were yellowed bank documents dating back to 1969. Account numbers, deposit slips, correspondence with First National Trust. At the bottom was a savings passbook with my name printed across the cover, Raymond Drake Garrett. Account opened January 15th, 1969. Initial deposit $50,000. $50,000 in 1969 was serious money, more than most people made in 2 years. How had a wildcatter saved that much? I drove to the downtown Chase branch that had absorbed First National through decades of mergers. The teller, Patricia, looked at the ancient passbook like I'd handed her a museum artifact. "Sir, this account is from 1969. I'm not sure our system can access records that old." She frowned, typed again. Her expression shifted from confusion to surprise. "Let me get my manager. Kevin Wallace looked like he'd seen everything in 30 years of banking, but his face suggested he hadn't seen this. Mr. Garrett, we need to discuss this privately. His mahogany office felt formal and intimidating. He placed the passbook on his desk carefully. This is extraordinary. Your grandfather established what was called a long-term growth account, a product First National offered briefly in the late 60s. He pulled out a calculator, making quick notes. The account was structured with compound interest at 6.8% annually locked for 45 years minimum. Through every bank merger, this rate was honored as contractual obligation. Ah, my mouth went dry. What are you saying? Wallace turned his monitor toward me. The number didn't make sense at first. I blinked, counted digits, blinked again. $1,647,382. That's impossible, I whispered. $50,000 at 6.8% compound interest over 55 years, Mr. Garrett. Your grandfather understood something most people never grasp, the power of time and patience. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. After months of eating ramen and counting pennies, I was staring at more money than I'd lost in the divorce. This is really mine. No mistake. No mistake. But Mr. Garrett, we need to schedule another meeting. There are additional items we need to discuss regarding your grandfather's arrangements. I walked out of that bank a different man, not just because of the money, but because I finally understood what Charles had been trying to teach me. Sometimes the most powerful moves are the ones nobody sees coming. The next morning, Kevin Wallace spread out documents that made my grandfather look like a financial genius. I'd barely slept, my mind spinning with the reality of $1.6 million. But as Wallace opened a thick folder marked Investment Portfolio, I realized the savings account was just the beginning. Your grandfather was more sophisticated than most people understood. Wallace began pulling out stock certificates yellowed with age. In 1970, he made what appeared to be a simple investment decision that turned out to be extraordinary. The documents showed Charles had taken $30,000, a massive sum for a wildcatter in 1970, and purchased Exxon stock. Not just any oil stock, but Exxon specifically, right as the company was positioning itself to dominate the energy sector for decades. Your grandfather's timing was perfect. He invested just before the oil crisis of the 70s when energy stocks exploded. But more importantly, he held on through every market crash, every recession, reinvesting dividends automatically. Wallace pulled up a portfolio summary on his computer. With stock splits and dividend reinvestment over 54 years, that $30,000 investment is now worth $3.2 million. I had to sit down before I fell down. Total inheritance. $4.8 million, Mr. Garrett. The number hit me like a physical force. 3 months ago, I'd been worth nearly $3 million. Now I had more than I'd ever dreamed possible. There's also this, Wallace said, handing me a sealed envelope with my name written in Charles's careful script. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, in my grandfather's handwriting, was a letter that seemed to speak directly to my soul. Dear Drake, if you're reading this, life has knocked you down hard. I don't know what form it will take, business failure, family betrayal, or both. But I know it will come because it comes for every man who builds something worth taking. I was a simple wildcatter who learned 3 truths. Money hidden can't be stolen. Time multiplies everything good and bad. And when wolves show their teeth, a smart man waits for the right moment to bite back. This money isn't just inheritance, it's ammunition. Use it wisely. Trust your instincts, not just your heart. The oil business taught me that pressure creates diamonds, but only if you can withstand the heat long enough. I chose Exxon because I understood oil, and I understood that Texas black gold would outlast every fashion, every trend, every economic cycle. Some investments are about getting rich quick. This investment was about getting even when it mattered most. Don't let them see all your cards, Drake. Never let them see all your cards. Your grandfather? Charles Garrett. P.S. That boy of yours will come around when he sees what real strength looks like. Sometimes a man has to lose everything to find out who he really is. I read the letter 3 times, each word sinking deeper into my understanding. Charles hadn't just left me money, he'd left me a strategy. He'd somehow known that someday I'd need more than financial security. I'd need the power to fight back. Your grandfather was quite the strategist, Wallace observed. He structured everything to mature when you turned 55, probably figuring that's when a man faces his greatest challenges. I thought about Diana's betrayal, Austin's cruelty, Theodore Manning's arrogance. They'd all underestimated me because they'd only seen what I'd shown them, a hard-working man who played by the rules. They had no idea what Charles Garrett had taught his grandson about patience, timing, and the art of the long game. Mr. Wallace, I'm going to need recommendations for the best attorneys and financial advisors in Houston. Money's no object. He smiled knowingly. I take it you're planning some changes. I folded Charles's letter carefully and put it in my jacket pocket right over my heart. Charles gave me more than money. He gave me a second chance at justice. Charles had given me more than money. He'd given me the power to fight back. But power without strategy is just expensive revenge. I needed someone who understood how to destroy Theodore Manning's world as systematically as he'd destroyed mine. Arthur Blackstone was Theodore Manning's former mentor, and when I offered him $500,000 to take down his protege, his eyes lit up like Christmas morning. His law office occupied the entire top floor of a downtown skyscraper with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Houston. Arthur himself was 75, silver-haired, and moved like a shark who'd been circling the same waters for decades. So you're the oil man Theodore screwed over, Arthur said, not bothering with pleasantries. Heard about your case. Sloppy work even for him. You know about it. Arthur poured himself bourbon from a crystal decanter, didn't offer me any. Theodore was my star pupil 15 years ago. Taught him everything he knows about destroying people in family court. He took a sip studying me. Problem is the little bastard forgot who taught him those tricks. Will you take the case? Take it, Drake. I've been praying for someone like you to walk through that door. Arthur's smile was predatory. Theodore thinks he's untouchable because he learned from the best. Time to remind him that the best is still better. What do you need from me? Nothing but money and patience. I'm going to tear apart his life piece by piece, starting with that corrupt judge he's been bribing for years. Within 48 hours, Arthur had assembled a team that made Theodore's operation look amateur. The investigation moved with surgical precision, and within a week we had evidence that would have made federal prosecutors weep. Judge Harrison and Theodore's corruption ran deeper than I'd imagined. 15 years of kickback schemes with my divorce just their latest victim. Diana's affair was a 2-year campaign coordinated with Theodore from the beginning, but Arthur's revelation about Austin changed everything. Your boy wasn't lying, Arthur said, sliding fabricated bank statements across his desk. Diana showed him these offshore accounts, secret investments, phantom partnerships. She convinced him you were stealing from the family. I stared at the perfect forgeries. She manipulated him. Like a master puppeteer, fed his resentment, made him feel like a victim. By the time he testified, he genuinely believed you were the villain. Arthur leaned back in his chair. Theodore's good, but he's not that good. This level of psychological manipulation, that's all Diana. The forensic accounting revealed Theodore's complete fraud. Every piece of evidence fabricated, every accusation false. But Arthur's masterstroke was connecting it to a 15-year pattern of similar cases. We're not just talking about your divorce anymore, Arthur announced, pulling up FBI contact information. This is racketeering, conspiracy. Theodore Manning isn't just corrupt, he's running a criminal enterprise. Special Agent Nicole Parker had been building cases against judicial corruption for years. Our evidence gave her everything she needed to bring down the entire operation. Arthur spread the complete file across his desk. 15 years of corruption laid out like a roadmap to federal prison. We don't just win this case, Arthur declared, his voice carrying absolute certainty. We destroy them all. I thought about Charles's letter, his advice about timing and patience. The old wildcatter had been right about waiting for the right moment. Tomorrow morning, Theodore Manning will learn what happens when you steal from a wildcatter's grandson. The wildcatter's grandson had learned his lessons well. At 9 a.m., FBI agents walked Theodore Manning out of his office in handcuffs. By evening, my son was sobbing at my apartment door. The morning started with Arthur's phone call. It's done. Nicole Parker and her team moved at dawn. Theodore, Judge Harrison, and 3 other attorneys in their network. 15 years of corruption all coming down at once. I watched the local news from my $800 apartment, seeing Theodore Manning, the man who destroyed my life with such arrogance, being led away in federal custody. His perfectly styled hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked genuinely afraid. Judge Harrison was arrested 2 hours later at his River Oaks mansion. The footage showed FBI agents carrying boxes of evidence while his neighbors watched in shock. 15 years of kickbacks, campaign contributions, and offshore accounts, all documented, with the precision Arthur's team had promised. By noon, the court had reversed every ruling from my divorce case. Assets were unfrozen, property was returned, and the forced sale of my company was declared null and void. Diana's carefully constructed victory crumbled in a matter of hours. She called me 17 times that day. I didn't answer. The local news ran the story continuously. Prominent divorce attorney and judge arrested in corruption scandal. They showed photos of Theodore's other victims, wealthy men who'd lost everything in suspicious divorce rulings over the past decade. My case wasn't unique. It was just the latest in a pattern of systematic theft. Diana's panic was visible even through the television screen. Reporters caught her leaving Theodore's law firm, her face pale and drawn, refusing to answer questions about her role in the conspiracy. She'd gone from triumphant ex-wife to potential criminal defendant in less than 12 hours. But it was Austin's reaction that mattered most. At 8 p.m., I heard a knock on my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw my son standing in the hallway, still wearing his work clothes, his face streaked with tears. "Dad?" His voice cracked like a 12-year-old's. I opened the door, and Austin collapsed against the frame, his body shaking with sobs that seemed to come from his soul. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so fucking sorry." He could barely speak through the tears. "She showed me bank statements, offshore accounts, fake documents. Made me believe you were stealing from us, hiding money while we struggled." I stood there watching my son, the young man who'd testified against me, who'd called me a ghost, who'd encouraged his mother's affair break apart in my doorway. "She said you had millions hidden away, that you were planning to leave us with nothing." Austin's words tumbled out between sobs. I believed her. I wanted to believe her because it was easier than admitting I'd been a terrible son. "Austin, no, let me finish." He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. I was angry about the missed games, the empty seats at graduation, all those times work came first. But instead of talking to you, I let her poison me against you. I helped destroy an innocent man because I was too proud to admit I missed my father. The hallway was quiet, except for Austin's ragged breathing. I thought about Charles's letter, his words about pressure, creating diamonds, about boys coming around when they see real strength. "She manipulated you, son. Diana played on your hurt, used it as a weapon against both of us. That doesn't excuse what I did. I testified against you. I called you abusive. I helped them steal everything you'd built." Austin wiped his face with his sleeve. "How can you even look at me?" I saw Charles's face in my memory, weathered hands teaching a 12-year-old boy about patience and forgiveness. Some lessons take decades to understand. "Because you're my son and we both got played by experts. The question isn't how we got here, it's what we do now." Austin stepped into my apartment, looking around at the sparse furniture and water-stained walls. "Dad, I want to make this right. I want to learn who you really are, not who I thought you were." I put my hand on his shoulder, feeling the weight of 26 years of missed connections and misunderstood intentions. "Son, we have a lot of work to do to fix this." 1 year after the arrests, I stood in the Charles Garrett Financial Education Center, watching Austin teach a young father about compound interest, and finally understood my grandfather's master plan. The community center was a converted warehouse in East Houston, where working families learned financial wisdom schools never taught. Every Saturday, we held classes on budgeting, investing, and the patient accumulation of wealth Charles had mastered decades before. Austin stood at the whiteboard explaining how small investments could grow into life-changing money over time. His voice carried conviction now, not the bitter entitlement that had poisoned our relationship. "My grandfather started with $50,000 in 1969, Austin told the class. Not because he was rich, but because he understood time was his greatest asset. He didn't need to get rich quick. He needed to get rich right. I watched from the back, remembering the angry young man who testified against me 18 months earlier. That Austin was gone, replaced by someone who'd learned that real strength comes from admitting you were wrong. The foundation had helped over 300 families start investment accounts, teaching them what Charles knew instinctively, that wealth wasn't about showing off, but about security, patience, and playing the long game. Theodore Manning was serving 5 years in federal prison, his law license revoked. Judge Harrison got 7 years and lost his pension. Diana worked as a dental receptionist, now living with her sister, driving a 10-year-old Honda. Some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt. I'd bought a modest 3-bedroom house, nothing like our River Oaks mansion. Despite having more money than I'd ever dreamed possible, I lived simply focused on meaningful work. Charles's inheritance wasn't just about financial security, it was about using resources to create something lasting. "Dad," Austin said after class as we cleaned up, "I've been thinking about what Grandpa Charles wrote, about pressure creating diamonds." "What about it?" "I think he knew losing everything would be the best thing that happened to us. Not because we deserved it, but because we needed it." Austin paused carefully. "I needed to lose the entitled kid I was to become the man I wanted to be. Our relationship wasn't perfect. 18 months couldn't erase 26 years of missed connections. But it was real now, built on honesty instead of assumptions, shared purpose instead of resentment. You know what I tell people about our story," Austin continued. "My grandfather taught me that patience beats greed every time. The race doesn't always go to the swift. Sometimes it goes to the steady." I thought about Charles's weathered face in that old photograph, his knowing smile. He'd understood something fundamental. The best hand is the one nobody knows you're holding until you lay it on the table. "Your grandfather would be proud," I told Austin. "Not because we got rich, but because we learned what wealth really means." Austin nodded, then surprised me. "I'm proud to be a Garrett dad, proud to carry on what Grandpa Charles started." As we locked up and walked to our cars, I realized Charles's greatest gift hadn't been money at all. It had been the lesson that sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what truly matters. The hidden strength isn't in what you show the world. It's in what you keep inside, waiting for the right moment to change everything. Looking back on this true story, I realize God works in ways we never expect. When I lost everything, my business, my family, my reputation, I thought my life was over. But God had a different plan, one that required me to walk through the valley of betrayal, to reach the mountaintop of wisdom. My grandfather Charles understood something profound about life that most grandpa stories never capture, that our greatest defeats often prepare us for our greatest victories. This wasn't just another true story about revenge. It was about divine timing, patience, and the power of hidden strength. The hardest lesson I learned was that success without character is just expensive failure. I'd built a multi-million-dollar empire but lost my family in the process. God used my darkest hour to teach me what truly mattered. Not the money in my bank account, but the love in my relationships. Charles's inheritance wasn't really about the $4.8 million. It was about understanding that time multiplies everything, our investments, our wisdom, and our capacity for forgiveness. Those grandpa stories he used to tell about patience and timing weren't just tales, they were prophecies preparing me for this moment. Austin's transformation showed me that even the deepest wounds can heal when we approach them with humility and grace. Watching him teach financial literacy to young fathers, sharing the same wisdom Charles had passed down through generations, proved that redemption is always possible when we surrender our pride. This true story taught me that God doesn't waste our pain, He uses it to refine us. Every betrayal, every loss, every moment of despair was preparing me to become the man my grandfather always knew I could be. The most powerful lesson from all those grandpa stories Charles shared was this: real wealth isn't about what you accumulate, but what you contribute. It's not about showing the world your strength, but about having the wisdom to keep some cards hidden until the moment is right. If this story resonated with your heart, I'd love to hear about your own experiences with patience and perseverance in the comments below. Please share this with someone who might need to hear that their current struggle could be preparing them for their greatest breakthrough. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories about overcoming life's toughest challenges, because sometimes the most powerful victories come from the most unexpected places.